The Cubs didn't have many bright spots in 2024, but PCA sure was one of them. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Cubs, your daily Chicago Cubs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Cubs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Sam Olber. I'm a lifelong fan, taking my passion into a discussion with you on all things Cubs. Thank you for being part of the show and making Locked On Cubs your first listen today. And the best way you can help us grow the show is listen every day, like the video, and comment anything below. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Happy belated Halloween to everybody. I'm recording this on Halloween, but you'll hear this the day after. I've had about as many trick-or-treaters as the Cubs have had playoff wins since 2017. It's been quiet over here. Hopefully that could change soon. Fun episode today. We're going to talk about some Red Sox documentary stuff on Netflix because I think there's some good Cubs nuggets in there with Theo and Jed. We're going to talk about the disappointment of the World Series. But we're going to start by talking about PCA and his position in the batting order and what we think of his season. So, when you're talking about PCA, I think, you first have to talk about the expectations coming into the campaign and would his bat be able to play. And when you look at the numbers with Pete Crow-Armstrong, and I'm going to kind of do two things at once here. I'm going to break down his season and give him a grade, and also talk about where he should bat in the batting order and use this information for both. So just looking at PCA, he didn't have many ABs in April of 24. So let's leave that alone. In May, he batted .233 with a .608 OPS. In June, he batted .145 with a .395 OPS. In July, he batted .197 with a .611 OPS. And then in August, he jumped up. He batted .314 with a .933 OPS, and then finished the year in September with a .256 batting average and with a .677 OPS. So what was so fascinating about those statistics with Pete was, I didn't realize it was that bad in May and June. I knew it wasn't great. And, he had basically one okay month, one unbelievable month, and a few really rough months. And that's kind of what it's going to be for a rookie like this and a guy that, has unbelievable speed and unbelievable tools, but the bat was going to come around. The great news was, though, is that the best month came in August, and then his second best month was in September. So the question is did he figure something out towards the end of the season there? And the answer simply, I think, is yes. But there's obviously still a ways to go offensively. In terms of an overall grade for Pete Crow-Armstrong in 2024, I think the grade's a simple B. And that may seem low to some people because he was so good the second half of the season, as we just discussed. But you have to look at the total body of work. You have to be fair. And his June, when the Cubs were really struggling, he was a big part of that. Defensively, he's outstanding. The only concern I have defensively with him is it seems like he's just not as comfortable at Wrigley Field as he is everywhere else. But I think that'll come with reps, and I think that'll come with time. And offensively, it just felt like the big adjustment that he made was he just became really aggressive, and pitches in the zone, he was able to square up. And there was so much concern going into the year and in the beginning part of the year about him being able to catch up to the fastball. And he did that in August and September. He didn't get beat by fastballs, and he showcased his outstanding power at times. I think the stolen bases were unbelievable for a large portion of the year. Then towards the end, it tailed off a little bit, and I'm not quite sure why. He got caught a couple times. He didn't run as much. I think for him going into next year, it's just going to be about, can he be the second half Pete Crow-Armstrong? You can't ask him to be the August version, because if he's the August version, he'll be one of the best players in baseball, if not a top 5 guy, if he's batting 330. But if he could be somewhere in the 250s, 260s, get that on base over 300, and then steal 50 plus bases without getting caught, that's just a tremendous weapon. We know the power's there. The big gap for Pete as a hitter is just figuring out the strike zone and being able to recognize pitches out of the hand and being able to lay off pitches and not get in a swing mode. But that's really easy for me to sit here and say that that's his weakness, but it's a very hard thing to fix. And as Theo always says, he might have to take another step back or two in order to take those 3 steps or 4 steps forward when he starts to figure that out. Because if he takes more pitches, that might not look great early on. So for all those reasons, I don't think, to answer the question in the title, that PCA should bat leadoff to start the season. I think that's a little bit too much pressure for him. And I think just because he had 2 really good months or a really good second half, I still would like to see him, anywhere in the 6 or 7 hole to just gather himself, see if he's in a rhythm, and then maybe he could play himself into that role. I think Ian Happ became pretty comfortable in that role. I think the Cubs offensively were really good when Ian Happ, or at least pretty good when Ian Happ was batting leadoff. I don't think this is one of those things where if Craig doesn't bat PCA leadoff, we pound the table. If he does, I'd be excited. I'm not saying no, but I don't think it's he has to or he should. Like, I felt really strongly that Nico Horner was not a leadoff hitter on this Cubs team and that Ian Happ should do that. I don't feel this strongly about PCA batting there, but if Craig wanted to shake things up and give him a chance, by all means, I'm not against it. But I totally understand just saying, hey, Pete, focus on defense, focus on your speed. Let's see where the offense is by about mid-May, by about Memorial Day, and go from there. I think the big thing for PCA that I'd like to see lineup-wise next year is, who does he hit in front of? Because that's one thing I think this Cubs team just didn't do a very good job of last year, is just play to their strengths, right? PCA has one big strength over everybody in baseball, basically, and that's his speed, his pure speed, his stolen base prowess. I don't want him, a guy like Miguel Amaya, hitting behind him, who's going to swing at first pitches and take the opportunity to steal away from PCA. You want an accomplished hitter behind him that's either comfortable taking pitches or that has really good bat-to-ball skills so you could play hit and run with him. Well, there's 2 guys that fit each of those categories. Number one, the bat-to-ball skills, is Nico Horner. And we talked about it with Nico. If Nico's back on this team, let's play to his strengths. What's Nico Horner better at than everybody on this Cubs team? His bat-to-ball skills, his ability to put the ball in play. So if PCA hits in front of him and he gets on to lead off an inning, then you could really get creative and say, all right, Nico's ahead 2-1. PCA, you're going to run here, but you don't have to worry about getting a great jump because Nico's going to be swinging. And the second baseman's going to go cover second base. There's going to be a vacated hole. Let's play first to third, because Nico has that type of bat control or bat ability. And then the other guy that I would love to hit behind him, if it's not Nico, would be Isaac Paredes, because Paredes is really comfortable taking pitches. He's really comfortable working deep in counts. So he'll give PCA the opportunity to steal bases, because as great as PCA's offensive explosion was in the second half, don't let that fool you in terms of what he's best at. It's running. We need him offensively to steal bases, create havoc on the bases, make guys make mistakes defensively. You want it to be controlled, but you want him to take advantage of that. By the way, now that I think of it, just about, I don't know, maybe an hour or so before I hit record, the Cubs announced they hired Quentin Berry to be their third base coach. Matt and I will talk about that for Monday, and it's good news. He had worked with Counsell before, and I'm excited about that hire. I just think about that because I think a guy like that could really help PCA on the base paths and really help him with some advantages and things like that. So, overall, I thought it was to me, the brightest spot of this year. I mean, Imanaga was the best performer, the best player, but PCA's development from the beginning of the year to the end. I mean, I read you the numbers. It was really bleak there early on, and he figured it out. He found something, and make no mistake, guys, like, this guy's got real power too. Go watch his home run he hit in Miami, I think, on that Saturday. I mean, he hit it halfway up the upper deck, and that's not a small ballpark. He could really hit for power. I think eventually he could hit in the 270s, 280s. He's got that tremendous speed. I thought defensively overall was a really good year. There were some bumps in the road. Obviously, that play in St. Louis and against St. Louis at Wrigley, and some other plays you'd like to have back at Wrigley. But again, he's so young, and there's going to be growing pains, and that's kind of the reason why I think just not quite yet batting him leadoff. I mean, it's a thought, and I'm not against it if they do, but let him get his feet under him a little bit more, because he's going to have a lot of expectations for himself this season, and I think throwing him right in the leadoff hole right away could create even more expectations. Hit him 6, hit him 7, hit Nico or Paredes behind him, and go from there. And I think it could be a big year for PCA. It's amazing kind of where he's at, because I was always a big fan of Pete, and I had a lot of confidence in him, but then I did start to doubt the bat just a little bit, and he's come back and really made those doubts look foolish, really, because at this stage of his career, to take that big of a step offensively, I think it's really good, and hopefully he can get off to a great start. But if he doesn't, it's also not the end of the world. Like I said, Theo said all the time, it's one of my favorite sayings of his: development isn't linear with these guys. You're going to go up and down and have those moments. But I think the expectation should be pretty big for PCA next season, and I think he will deliver. Speaking of Theo and his expressions, there's a new documentary out on Netflix about the Red Sox 2004 comeback, and I want to talk about it because there's a lot of Jed in there, and there's a lot of Theo, and there's some kind of cool revelations, at least for me. You guys might not find it cool, but I think it's interesting, and I want to talk about that coming up next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel's America's #1 sportsbook. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Folks, I really want to bet the Bears this Sunday. They're 1-point underdogs in Arizona, and Arizona should be like a second home for the Bears. There's a lot of Chicagoans in Arizona. I would bet it's close to 50-50 in terms of Bear fans and Cardinal fans, and I really want to bet them. This coaching staff and what's come out of Hallis Hall this week, it just hasn't been very good, and it's scaring me off. I don't know what I'll end up doing. I'll let you guys know. I think the Bears should win this game Sunday, but I'm still just so traumatized from last week. I may just need a breather. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. We are back here on Locked On Cubs, and I think the Netflix doc, it's called The Comeback. It's about the 2004 Red Sox, and I want to talk about this because, first of all, I forgot how involved Jed was. I knew Theo was the youngest GM in MLB history. I knew that the Red Sox originally wanted Billy Beane, but Billy Beane didn't want to go across the country and be away from his family. And so they decided to give it to Theo. And I knew it was an analytics-based hire, but I forgot how involved, Jed was Theo's right-hand man as the assistant to the GM. And I don't want to give too much away from the documentary. I just want to say that there's just a couple of things I want to talk about. And that's, yes, Theo was brought in for his, at that time, forward thinking, the analytics, and valuing on base percentage. And Jed talks about that. And like I said, I highly recommend watching it. It's very good. But the other side of it was that Theo and Jed talked about things that, and again, I'm not sitting here trying to say that I'm right or anything like that, but it was so refreshing to hear the other side of it, the combination of analytics, but still the old school and the classic baseball stuff. For example, Theo talked about how the Red Sox had a lot of introverted players, right? They didn't have like that true leader. They had a bunch of introverted players. And he talked about how that could sometimes create a bad narrative when things aren't going well. And they needed a guy that was just different, a little spark, a little energy. And that was part of the reason, outside of the fact that he had a very high on base percentage, that they brought in Kevin Millar for that clubhouse aspect, that spark, that jolt. How many times have we talked about that with the Cubs? And we don't know what type of personality Dansby has. But, some of these guys, during that season, we were just in April and May and June, we were just, can somebody show a little life, a little energy, just something, and I related to that. And in addition to that, I think we all remember older baseball fans, the fight between Jason Varitek and Alex Rodriguez in 2004. And Jed was talking about how when that fight was going on, he looked over at Theo in the stands and Theo was cheering and not like cheering, but like smiling. And then Theo comes in the dock and says, yeah, it was just so nice that we finally showed some fight. We were just in this boring malaise period for so long. I just wanted our guys to show some fight and character. That was all of us in May and June until Justin Steele finally did it in Milwaukee. And, Theo talks about in 2004 when he made that very controversial move to trade Nomar. And, it was about defense, but it was also about the clubhouse vibes, because Nomar was a little disgruntled in the clubhouse and he wanted to make sure that the clubhouse was, doing the right things and had that great chemistry. And he uses words like when they came back in Game 4, how much momentum he thought they had heading into Game 5. Whenever we talk about momentum now, it's like, well, technically momentum's not this, it's the starting pitcher or whatever. So hearing Theo talk about that and talk about how important the connectivity was between his team and the clubhouse and the fight and the leadership, I just thought was kind of nice to hear. And obviously Jed was a really big part of it. So the point I'm trying to make is that Jed knows this. And so whether it's Craig or Jed or Carter, I think that's something next season I really want to see. And look, I get it. The 2004 Red Sox also had Manny Ramirez, David Ortiz. I think both those guys finished top 5 in the MVP voting that year. They had a rotation of Pedro Martinez and Curt Schilling. I mean, they were littered with superstars. The Cubs aren't even close to the caliber of talent that team had. But the point is, you need both. You need superstars, you need talent, but you also need that hunger, that leadership, that energy, that fight. You know what I mean? And I honestly feel like in 2024, the Cubs didn't have either. And the word was urgency. And I don't think Theo used urgency in the doc, but you could tell when the Red Sox were struggling in 2004 that he was looking for a little bit more urgency, a little bit more oomph. And it just felt like for 2 consecutive months, we felt that as well. And I talked about it, and it was more, Craig's just business. It's not that. And, it even goes to, Craig just sometimes you got to argue in defense, and just those type of things. And it was just very refreshing for me to hear Jed and Theo both talk about that a little bit, in addition to the analytics, in addition to acquiring superstar players, in addition to, looking at the numbers, because I've always said it's not one or the other, it's both. You need stars, you need to follow the analytics, you need good numbers. The numbers don't lie, but you also need those things that aren't in the box score. The Kevin Millar leadership and keeping guys loose and having a good time and making sure guys are held accountable and fighting for each other and those things. And it just felt like this team in 24 was missing both. And if you can't go out and get a superstar, if you can't go out and get a Juan Soto or whatever, that's fine. I mean, it's not fine, but at least come back next year and pay attention to that side of it. The intensity, hey, we're not going to have 2 months where we're just sleepwalking through the season. We're going to figure this out now. We're going to shake things up. So I thought that was a great doc. I highly recommend you guys watching it. I totally not forgot, but just, didn't realize that Jed's been around, man. He's had a lot of really good experience. He knows what he's doing. He's a smart guy. He just, number one, and we'll talk about this at some point in the offseason, he needs a budget that he can work with, but he also needs to make sure that he signs the right guys and does the right stuff. This is, obviously probably his last major chance. And I hope he comes through, and I just hope we have a team that makes the postseason next year, but at the very least that I just feel like has a little bit more fight and isn't just so kind of, I think robotic is the word that I would use. Coming up next, let's talk about, speaking of superstars and all that stuff, the World Series. We're going to talk about that concluding coming up next. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Whether it's a Cubs game, a comedy show, or a concert, I love going to live events. And now Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. The experience of searching for and then buying tickets on Game Time is simple. Plus, Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. What time is it? Game time. Back here on Locked On Cubs. We're going to do a little best and worst of the week, but it's going to be a World Series edition. And look, the worst of the week for me, since I saw you guys last week solo, was just the World Series. I was so excited for it. Friday night, the game one was incredible. But, I thought the Dodgers were the better team. And even though Friday night was exciting, I was just looking for a deep series. And when the Yankees lost that game Friday, I had some concerns that, there could be a shorter series after that, because that was a game the Yankees or the underdog needs to win. But what was frustrating for me about this series is that I know games 1 and game 5, 1 and 5 were memorable. But I wanted this to be a series where it was, Judge and Soto and Stanton were great, but, the Dodgers just had a little bit more firepower if that was the case. This wasn't that. This was the Dodgers just made less mistakes than the Yankees. The Yankees handed them games 1 and games 5. And I just, I understand that's how baseball works. And if anything, it's a great reminder, no matter who you have out there, it always comes down to the little things in baseball, comes down to defense, comes down to catching the ball, comes down to base running, comes down to managerial decisions, comes down to backing up plays, all that stuff. But I didn't want that this series. I didn't want this to be the series of, the Dodgers, made less mistakes than the Yankees did. The Yankees handed them the series. They were right there. The Dodgers were super banged up. Credit Freddie Freeman for the MVP. He wasn't 100%. He was amazing. But the Dodgers only had 3 really reliable, healthy starters. Judge did nothing the first 4 games of the series. He finally awakes in game 5. You're like, all right, Judge is about to get going. We're going 3-2 back to LA, and the Dodgers bullpen's running on fumes. And all of a sudden the Yankees go drop fly ball by Judge, bad throw to third by Volpe. Rizzo fields a ball at first where Cole needs to be over to the bag. He wasn't. It was a really bad play. And I don't know. I wanted to feel fulfilled watching that World Series. I wanted it to be a huge win for baseball, and I kind of left just kind of disappointed. Maybe that's just me. I wanted a deeper series. It was a really rough, this is a Cubs podcast. It was a really rough series for Anthony Rizzo. I thought he could be an X factor in this series, and he was, just unfortunately in the wrong way, because he came up in some big spots, didn't deliver. He was in the middle of that play that really wasn't his fault with Garrett Cole, but it was unfortunate, and it'll be really interesting to see where he ends up next year as a free agent, because his bat just looked slow to me in the World Series. His bat just looked slow, but it was tough. It was a tough series. I was hoping for a little more. Ohtani was banged up. You didn't get much out of Judge. Freeman was amazing. Betts was good. Soto was good. Walker Buehler was awesome. Struggled all year. Dodgers aren't going anywhere. Better get used to it. We're going to play against the world champs for the second year in a row. This time it'll be in Japan. They're going to get healthy. They just won the World Series without Glass now, without Gavin Stone, without May. Buehler wasn't good all year until just at the very end. Bobby Miller wasn't great. Kershaw wasn't a part of the fold. It's only going to get tougher. You just have to keep reminding yourself that the playoffs are random, and that the Dodgers, as great as they are, were 1 game away from getting eliminated in round 1 by the Padres. So anything can happen, but no matter what the Cubs do this offseason, they're not going to have a roster that's comparable to that team. So they're going to have to figure it out in different ways. But the offseason's officially underway. Matt and I are going to talk about it. We'll talk about some of these new coaching hires. So far, there's been one reported. Maybe there'll be another one before the weekend ends. And I guess I technically didn't do a best of the week, but my best of the week is probably the fact that it's offseason time. We're officially here. We're through October. Now we got 1 month, November, 2 months, December, 3 months, January, 4 months, February, until we really start thinking about baseball again. It's not that far away. It goes quick. And I'm excited to talk about it and get through this offseason. And hopefully this Cubs team gets better. And we go into the season feeling really good about things. Thank you so much for checking out this edition of Locked On Cubs. You give us 20 to 30 minutes, and we'll give you all things Cubs with a laugh or two along the way. Be sure to hit subscribe on YouTube, smash the like button for the algorithm, and leave a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, and everywhere you get your podcasts. I'm Sam Mulber, and this is Locked On Cubs.